What's up, everybody? Nick Whalen, John McKechnie here with you from RotoWire, digging in on our best bets for Week 15 of the NFL season. John, things did not go our way on the sides in Week 14. I'll say that. We were both heavily invested in the Philadelphia Eagles. We did acknowledge it felt like almost too good of a spot for Philly, and that turned out to be the case.
It did. I was watching the end of that game. I watched most of it. And you know how it is when your cover's blown, you just kind of want them to lose.
Yep.
Right. And I really needed Xavier Legette to just bring that sucker in. I mean, it was a great ball from Bryce Young. It was a great drive from Bryce Young, but couldn't get it. I don't know if it was lingering effects from eating a raccoon or whatever it may have been for Xavier Legette that prevented him from catching that ball. But there we were. But Philly escapes with the win, but they burn us on not covering. And I was looking at my notes from last week before we turned it over to Week 15. And first line about the Bears: is this a donkey bet? And I spent several minutes explaining why it wasn't actually. And no, I answered the question immediately, and the Bears answered the question immediately as well. So sorry, folks.
Is it bad if you're being outgained 320-4 at the half in general? I'd like to see the numbers on how many of those teams end up covering. I would guess it's probably close to zero. Total no-show for the Chicago Bears, kind of a get-right spot for San Francisco. John, of course, we have no teams on bye this week, so we got a full board. We won't talk about the TNF game because by the time you hear that, or hear this show, I should say, that game will likely be wrapped up. But super fun game between the Rams and the Niners there. But that means we have 15 other games to choose from this week. And for the most part, we have a lot of tight spreads. The big outlier, of course, is the Baltimore Ravens coming out of their bye. They're up to 16.5-point favorites at some shops on the road at the New York Giants. We got a couple other games, hanging around a touchdown. Minnesota's at 6.5, 7. The Commanders are up to 7.5 against the Saints. Cardinals are pushing toward a touchdown as well. But before we dive in on the three games we each want to discuss, I want to get your thoughts on this 16.5-point spread when it comes to Baltimore. I know it's not going to make our card this week, especially in light of the Eagles game last week, but my goodness, man, I mean, this is pushing biggest number of the year. How do you assess this game?
Right. And the Giants are obviously in this free fall, this turmoil. Drew Lock being banged up. So the potential of Tommy DeVito being back in there, I think has fueled some of the movement there. But the Ravens coming off the bye, they didn't look great going into it, obviously, with the loss against the Eagles, but completely different team that they'll be facing this time around. I just don't trust the Ravens with big numbers generally. I think that's been kind of a recurring theme on this pod, especially the last couple of seasons when they've really kind of fallen short anytime that they're favored by more than a touchdown. So now it's more than 2 touchdowns. That's something that definitely gives me some pause. I have some friends in New York that are Ravens fans that were doing some digging on going to the game this weekend, and it is an interesting. This might only interest Baltimore people, but Baltimore people are used to New Yorkers like just taking over Camden Yards, that type of thing. But there's apparently a sentiment in New York this week that there's going to be a ton of Ravens fans in the house because tickets are cheap, and it's a short train ride, short bus ride, quick flight, whatever you want to do. Might be a lot of purple in the house, but regardless, this is a game that terrifies me for spread purposes. I would feel bad picking the Giants, right? Because how can you have any faith in the Giants against a good team? But at the same time, the Ravens don't tend to really put teams away the way that they should, especially when the mismatch on paper looks like this.
Yeah. I think it's going to come down to what the Ravens could do defensively. And we have a low total in this game, 42.5. There are also 43s out there. I mean, implied score basically of like 30-13, which seems pretty doable, right? It's just I'm fearful of the backdoor here, with that Ravens secondary, right? Of almost kind of what we saw last week, with the Giants just being completely out of that game the entire day, and then all of a sudden you tune back in with 3 minutes left, and there's Drew Lock scrambling around and Malik Neighbors finding openings. And all of a sudden they're putting points on the board. So can the Giants get to 17 points? Because that might be what it takes to end up covering. But I know that's a big time stay away for both of us. Let's get to our 3 games that we want to discuss, John. And I'm excited to hear your case for this Miami-Houston game because I have this labeled as one of my biggest stayaways of the week. So which side do you like?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, certainly. But after looking a little bit closer at this Dolphins Texans game, this one being played in Houston, I'm taking the dog. I'm taking the road underdog. I am taking the Miami Dolphins at +3. I think that's it. That's a good number to get in at. At some places, it's 2.5. That's a totally different discussion, of course. The Dolphins, another team that sort of, we were bandying about last week. Kind of, you get that brutal feeling when it's a 6.5 and it goes to overtime. It's like, ugh, even if they score,
No chance.
We can't win. This is brutal, and that's what happened. But we digress. I think that was maybe the Jets' last stand, and maybe wanting to have some semblance of pride against a divisional opponent. But even still, Houston coming off the bye. Teams coming off the bye haven't been great this year. They're just 9-13 straight up this year. So I mean, just not even numbers wise. I mean that's or spread wise, that's not great to be 9-13. And I just think that Houston has looked several notches below what it did a year ago. I think that Miami, on balance, I'd say that, save for the Packers game, have really been a much sharper team over the last month and a half or so. And Houston, their secondary has been gettable, and that's a bad situation when you're going up against a Dolphins team that is so dangerous in that facet of the game. They've allowed 26 passing touchdowns this year. That's tied with the Falcons for the most in the NFL. So I think that the Dolphins hang in here. It wouldn't completely stun me if the Dolphins got the win. I think I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but Tua has been good in dome stadiums. The Dolphins are kind of a de facto dome stadium, if you really think about, or dome team, if you think about it. I think that they can go in there and get this done. The concern, of course, is going to be the Miami defense, but I think we have enough here with Miami. Give me Miami and the points.
Okay, you laid out a pretty good case here. I think the Miami offense getting both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle going really for what feels like the first time all year this past week. That's big. Obviously, Jonnu Smith continues to be involved, even if all of that production doesn't come until overtime. I'm curious to see the Houston pass rush. Like how much pressure can they get on Tua? Because this has been a Houston pass defense that I agree with you is gettable, susceptible to big plays. Like you said, they've given up a bunch of touchdowns. They've had some down weeks. But they are 5th in pass defense EPA on the year. They are a turnover-happy defense. They have 16 interceptions on the season, second only to the Minnesota Vikings. They're 3rd in sack rate. They're 2nd in total sacks. So can they get to Tua? Because I don't think the Dolphins are going to be able to run the ball. I think that's almost a foregone conclusion at this point. Every single week, Devon Achane continues to be a solid fantasy back because he's catching enough passes. He usually finds his way into the end zone. But it just feels like every single week, it's like 14 carries for 34 yards.
No, that's definitely an issue. They're going to be kind of one speed there as far as just going to the pass, and that offensive line is not great for Miami. So that's definitely a potential weak point in taking this Miami side. But I think that Houston offensively has kind of struggled a little bit. If they slow Mixon down and if Miami slows Mixon down, makes Stroud, I wouldn't have thought in a million years that I'd be saying this year, but if you make Houston one-dimensional towards the pass as well, that might be something that works against them as well, because I think Miami's secondary is at least passable. So keep Tua upright, and I think that this will go okay for the Miami side. And if Miami, I mean, you spend a draft pick on Jalen Wright, who was insanely good last year at Tennessee, more physical, bigger back than Devon Achane. If the Achane just runs up the middle aren't working, maybe try the guy who's a little bit more suited for that. I don't know.
For my first game, John, this was one that I've just been waiting to jump on, and the number's at 7 now. I did grab it at 6.5 when it first opened on Sunday night. The Washington Commanders on the road at the New Orleans Saints, and New Orleans continues to play reasonably well, I think, given their personnel, play competitive football every single week with an interim coach. But they no longer have Derek Carr, and that means we are moving on to Jake Haener. And this is a big-time fade of Jake Haener. It's a vote of confidence in favor of the Commanders. I know you mentioned earlier in the show that teams coming out of a bye have not really had much of advantage this season. That's been the case for the last couple of years, so that's not a huge factor in the handicap here. But Washington had its get-right game before the bye. They steamrolled the Titans. That was a spot where I actually thought Tennessee could compete. They did not. One of the best run defenses in the NFL just got completely steamrolled by that Washington team. So I think the Commanders are kind of back on the right side of things. They have their confidence back. They have Marshawn Lattimore fully healthy for this defense. And yeah, they're going on the road, but this has not been a home field advantage for the New Orleans Saints for several years. The Saints are 23-41 ATS at home since 2017. Dan Quinn, 11-1 ATS as a head coach against losing teams since 2019. And may I remind you, John, in the 3 games without Derek Carr this season, the Saints were outscored 110-45. 110-45 in those 3 games. And I'll also remind you that over half of those points for the Saints came in that one quarter when Spencer Rattler went wild against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I think it's a low-scoring day for the Saints offense. We get a low total in this game at 43.5. Maybe they could keep the Commanders under wraps, but I like Washington to win this game by 10 or so.
And, when it comes to Jake Haener, he's kind of a Mount Rushmore guy for me for funniest guys to ever get caught with PEDs.
Yeah.
I mean, what's going on there, dude? But, at least max it out if you're gonna dabble. Come on there. But I am seeing some 7.5s out there, but it sounds like with your confidence that Washington can win this one by double digits, that question is moot.
Yeah. At 7.5, it's not a great number. I get that, but I like Washington here. I'm fading Jake Haener at home. Before we get to your next game, by the way, John, I forgot to mention something when we were talking Baltimore. Derrick Henry cut the dreads. How concerning is this?
It makes you wonder what's going on up there. Is everything okay there?
Yeah.
King Henry, you hope it is. But I don't know. Will it make him faster? Because those were some pretty serious dreads that he was, running around with. So maybe that added some more oomph to the end of his runs, you could say. Right. But maybe he reaches that top speed a little bit quicker, sans the dreads.
Yeah, I think that's spot on analysis. We'll find out. That was one where, I saw the photos going around on Monday and I was like, is this like an NBA Centel Photoshop thing where, they, like once a month they do that, like James Harden has shaved his beard. And it's like, no, he hasn't. Like, who thought this would be funny? And I had to do some deep digging to confirm that Derrick Henry did in fact cut the dreads. It's going to be a little bit jarring, but we'll see if that impacts him this week. All right, John, your next game, where are we going?
All right, so we're going into waters that I rarely tread in. But we're taking a total here. We actually got 2 totals coming up on the card. But we're going to start out with the Panthers-Cowboys matchup. And you might say, oh, the defenses are awful in this game. Like, how do you like the under 43 in this one? It's a low total. Well, that's all well and good. But, like, if the offenses can't really do much to make it sting, then I think it's okay. And I think I'm more concerned with the Cowboys offense not being able to generate offense. I think that, that against a markedly worse defense against the Bengals at home this past week, they still didn't generate a ton offensively. So them going on the road, I'm not certain that they're lighting up the scoreboard. I think that the Panthers defense has been playing a bit better of late. They definitely kept a lid on the Eagles last week. Now, if you look at the season-long trends for Dallas, they've definitely been a team that is a little bit better on the road than it is at home for our purposes. 3-3 against the spread on the road and 5-2 to the over this season while on the road. So that's all well and good, but I feel like this game is like a Carolina 24-17 type of game. So that keeps us just underneath it. It might be a little bit sweaty. It's going to be a tricky one to get there with it being what it is. But, I like this Panthers team. I think that they're going to be able to get it done. I know the Cowboys just lost a little bit more defensively with Overshone blowing out his knee. That's an awful injury for that defense that really couldn't afford to lose another piece. So maybe the vulnerability here is Carolina's ability to move the ball on Dallas. But if they're doing that, maybe Dallas just kind of no-shows completely and we get like a 31-10 game.
Yeah, this one was tough for me. I thought about making Carolina one of my plays, ended up backing away from it. And, Carolina's been, for the most part, an over team this year. Part of that is they, for a while, were, giving up like 35 points a week. I mean, they've only gone under this number in 3 games on the year. Those came against the Chargers, the Giants, and then, of course, last week against Philly. The bad defenses versus shaky offenses question is really tough here. But I do think both of these teams struggle against the run more than anything, both defenses, I should say. So I think if you look at it from a burning clock perspective, and you do think there is some offensive success, I do think a lot of that comes on the ground. They're not necessarily teams that are hitting these huge plays through the air. So I follow the logic there. I like the call. Under 43, John is going on Dallas, Carolina. I'm going to take us to Nashville, John. And after taking the Titans 2 weeks in a row, I don't know what I was thinking. I actually, you know what? I do know what I was thinking. I was fading Mac Jones and the Jaguars last week, and Tennessee absolutely should have won that game. Absolutely should have won 2 weeks ago against the Commanders. That was just a bad pick by me. No two ways about it. But Mac Jones threw 2 picks in the first half. Tennessee just refused to capitalize. At one point, they ran 6 plays inside the 3-yard line, could not punch it in. Of course, end up losing that game straight up. So I'm not taking the bait with Tennessee. We are taking the Cincinnati Bengals -4.5 on the road this week. You can make the argument for motivational questions with Cincinnati. I know they're not technically eliminated, but they know their season is over. They did win and cover last week against Dallas. Needed kind of a fluky miracle play on the block punt to end up getting that last possession, but took care of business. They also closed as 5 or 5.5 point favorites, depending on where you looked last week at Dallas. Now it's only 4.5 against an inferior team in Tennessee. I know it's an outdoor game. I get that. Short week. Still just feels a little bit odd to me. I think Dallas is at the very least, kind of an even opponent. And to me, a better team and a more trustworthy team, even with Cooper Rush, than Tennessee. So I think we're getting a good number here. And Tennessee has really struggled when they've played good to great quarterbacks this season. I think some of the defensive numbers are inflated because they have played a high number of bad quarterbacks. And basically every single time they've run into a good quarterback, other than the win over CJ Stroud a few weeks ago, which was just a bizarre game for a number of reasons, they've lost by double digits. They're 1-5 straight up against what I would define as good quarterbacks. And again, that only win has come against Houston. So we just can't trust the Titans right now. I know the Bengals defense is vulnerable. Maybe there are some deep balls to Nick Westbrook-Akine and Calvin Ridley to keep them in this, but I think over the course of 60 minutes, the Bengals pull away. Even if it's ugly like it was last week, I think they can win by a touchdown.
Yeah, these are our two kind of shock collar teams that we kind of invented last week. Although I only wear the shock collar for the Bengals and you for the Titans. So actually, it works better if you're picking the Bengals. You can take that with a little bit more confidence, I would say. And I think it's just a really good parallel that you're drawing between what the closing line was in Dallas versus what it is right now with the Bengals going to Tennessee, really, and they are favored by less than they were against Dallas on Monday night. That seems to be a bit odd to me as well. No one's going to pretend that like this Bengals defense is great, and this Tennessee offense that is kind of an all or nothing type of mindset. It makes you a little bit concerned that maybe Levis is able to land some deep shots, but they lost to Mac Jones last week, and now you got Joe Burrow coming in. I mean, right. That Burrow and the boys are on that side of the ball, they are absolutely taking care of business. And then lastly, we got a little bit of coaching revenge going on here. We got Brian Callahan going up against his former sensei. I think Zach Taylor could put him in a pretzel here. So I like the Bengals here too. Tennessee
threw for 146 yards last week on the worst pass defense in the NFL. In the Jacksonville Jaguars. So if you want to claim it's a buy low spot for Tennessee, maybe it is, but this team has done nothing but lose against the number this season. So I'm on the Bengals -4.5. John, for your last game, you're focusing on the same game that I am. You're looking at the total. I'm looking at a side.
I am looking at the total in this Browns-Chiefs game played by the Lake there in Cleveland, and I like the under 44, which you can get at BetMGM. At other spots, it's 43.5, like at FanDuel. But like to find the highest one if I'm going low. That's where we are. These teams combined over the last 3 weeks, if their metrics were matched up perfectly, averaging around 46 combined points per game. Overs 3-3 in games at Cleveland this year, so not a ton of signal there, but I think win's a factor here, and I think that my general lack of confidence in this Chiefs' ability to put up significant amounts of points is the other thing that leads me towards the under here. So I mean, there might be gusts up to 28. I think we're going to have sustained winds in the 18-mile-an-hour range. Both these quarterbacks have strong arms, of course, but I think it is a factor. The ball's going to move around a little bit. It's going to be a little bit funky. It could hurt the deep passing game in this one. What scares me is the Jameis Winston pick six factor. That's always an under killer, and that's certainly in play here. But I'm not sure if this Chiefs defense has played all that lights out of late. They were certainly a bit better earlier on in the season. So I'm looking at just a low scoring game. I'm thinking like 20-17, something in that range. I think Cleveland keeps it competitive. I think it ends up being low scoring. I don't think that the Chiefs on the road, even against a kind of mediocre defense like the one that Cleveland has, and not for nothing, but I mean Patrick Mahomes is getting knocked around. I would say that on balance that the Chargers have a better defensive front than the Browns do, but the Browns do have Myles Garrett. That could be an issue for this offensive line that seems to be a little bit leaky at the moment. That could kill some drives. So give me the under 44 in Browns Chiefs.
I hope this goes under because I like the Browns plus 4.5. I think the fewer points on the board, the better here. KC, of course, has failed to cover 7 in a row, which does scare me a little bit. It's like at some point that trend is going to break, but you could have said that for the last 3 or 4 weeks, and the Chiefs do nothing but play these close games against mostly inferior competition. You beat Carolina by 3, you beat the Chargers by 2, you beat the Raiders by 2. It's a team that has been, trending under of late. They put up 19 on the Chargers. They put up 19 on Vegas. They put up 21 against Buffalo. They put up 16 against Denver. And, the Cleveland defense is very much hit or miss. Some weeks it looks good. Some weeks it doesn't. I actually thought they comported themselves pretty well last week against Pittsburgh. I think I would like to say you take away the 2 Jameis turnovers, but it feels like that's something that you have to bank on every single week. They had the 2 missed field goals in a row, one before half, one coming out of half. Like that was a winnable game for the Cleveland Browns. They held Pittsburgh under 300 total yards. And I think you could do the same against this Kansas City team. I mean, we are in week 15. I don't think the switch is going to flip anytime soon for Kansas City. We know who this team is. We know how they tend to win games. I still think Kansas City probably wins. Maybe it's another last second field goal. You mentioned the conditions in Cleveland. I'm not sure if there's like a side that favors, but I don't think it's a good thing as far as points being put up, as far as one team running away from the other. The Browns have some big playability with Jameis Winston. You live with the bad, but you also take some of the big gains that just weren't there in this offense under Deshaun Watson. Again, they outgained Pittsburgh last week. It's really just going to come down to how many killer mistakes can the Browns commit? Maybe we can live with 1 pick 6, but if we got 2 pick 6s, if Jameis throws 3 or 4 interceptions, they're probably not covering this game. And I will say the really the biggest point that kind of caused me to go back and forth on this one is the Cleveland kicking game is so brutal, right? I mean, they are leaving points on the board every single week when it comes to missed field goals. With the wind, I certainly don't think that changes. Maybe if anything, it just pushes them away from trying field goals, which I think might be a positive for this offense, because even in plus conditions, Justin Hopkins is missing from 37. He's missing from 42. Like, I think just if it's 4th and short, maybe you just go for it in this situation. And Cleveland has been a pretty good 4th down team since Jameis Winston took over. So we're going to keep riding this wave with the Kansas City Chiefs. I think they win the game, but this could be, yet another, field goal type of situation. So we'll take the Browns plus 4.5. You like the under 44 in that game. Well, let's get to the prop market, John. I'll let you lead us off as you do each week. What do you like on that side of things?
Well, speaking of that Steelers-Eagles matchup, I like the under on the Jalen Hurts 197.5 passing yards. You can get that at DraftKings. I understand like the counter to that, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, like that. There's all the drama, invented drama in Philly about the passing game right now, and the AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts relationship, and Devontae Smith apparently a little bit unhappy as well, but I'm not sure he's super vocal about it. But either way, even if Philadelphia tries to gear things to throw it a little bit more, that's a tough defense to throw on, and I think they'd be doing themselves a disservice. I think that they are at their best when they are sticking to the run. So I'm looking at an under 197.5 for Jalen Hurts. I like a Tyreek anytime touchdown plus 140. I know the risk is kind of an ongoing concern for him, but again, this is a pass defense in Houston that gives up the big play, that gives up the touchdown. I think Tyreek can be on the receiving end of one of those, and frankly, plus 140 for a Tyreek touchdown, like that's just kind of a good deal. I like Zay Flowers to get back into the end zone. It's been a minute since he paid a visit. I think the last time he scored was against the Steelers a few weeks back. He's plus 140. think we can both expect the Ravens to find the end zone multiple times on Sunday. I think Zay Flowers gets back in the mix as they recalibrate the offense coming out of the bye. I like Jake Ferguson under 41.5 receiving yards. Has just crossed this number once in the last 6 games. He's averaging 28.7 receiving yards per game in that stretch. And give me the under on Tank Dell, 42.5. I understand he runs a ton of routes, but he's getting targeted on fewer than 1 out of every 5 routes that he's running. Just not a huge amount of involvement there, just a decent amount of cardio. And frankly, I just don't think he's that great. I think last year was probably the best we'll ever see of Tank Dell, and I'm willing to take the under on him. He's mostly been under this for the large part of the last month or so.
So you like the under for Jake Ferguson receiving yards. I'm going to the Jake Ferguson anytime touchdown market here. Plus 265. Carolina has been the worst defense in the NFL against opposing tight ends this season. So a plus 265. I like Jake Ferguson to be on the receiving end of a score. Like Devontae Adams, anytime touchdown this week, plus 145. Jets passing game started to come around. Aaron Rodgers' first 300 game in 35 starts. You had to go all the way back to week 14 of the 2021 season for the last time that happened. Obviously, the Jets continue to find ways to lose games, but you're going up against the worst secondary in the NFL, the worst pass defense EPA in the NFL in the Jaguars. So I like Devontae Adams. Patrick Mahomes, under 252.5 passing yards. He threw it 37 times last week, only got to 210 yards. He has cruised over this number a decent amount of late, but we talked about the conditions in Cleveland. I don't think that leads us toward a high-volume passing day or a lot of points on the board for the Kansas City Chiefs. So we like the under 252.5 there. Aaron Rodgers, over 234.5 passing yards. Again, just talked about it with Devontae going up against the Jags defense. I think this should be another good spot for that Jets passing game. And yeah, the Jets ran the ball okay last week. We'll see what the situation is with Breece Hall. Jags run defense is actually pretty solid. That's been one thing they can hang their hat on this year. So I think it is more of a pass script for the Jets this week. I like Jahmyr Gibbs, over 21.5 receiving yards in that showdown with the Bills. Bills are number 3 in receiving yards allowed to running backs this season. And Jacoby Myers, I think it is his turn to take advantage of this Atlanta Falcons defense. Over 59.5 receiving yards for Myers. If it is indeed Aiden O'Connell, we're riding with that. If AOC can't go, which again, I think he is, but if he can't go, if it's Desmond Ridder, maybe we back away. But I think we're getting a pretty good number against a secondary that's giving up just immense yardage, immense fantasy points every single week, especially over these last 4 games.